Any horror fan worth their weight in gold knows about the Universal monsters. While the monster universe for the Universal monsters has been a bit of a hit or miss in recent years, the comic universe surrounding them hasn't been. Allow me to tell you guys about the most recent and absolutely diabolical rendition of our favorite Universal monster, Dracula, created by James Tynion IV, Russ Wooten, and Martin Simmons. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Dracula, Comic Explorer. A fly lying on its back. That's how the comic issue starts. Mr. Renfield, a pallid man with dark eyes, talks about how his master lived. Mr. Renfield's master apparently promised him lives, the small insects like the flies we see him play with. He believes that by taking the lives of these insects, he can grow stronger, just like his master showed him to be. Now, Dr. Seward, the psychologist interviewing Mr. Renfield, doesn't quite believe him. Can you blame him, though? I know I wouldn't believe him either. The doctor asks Mr. Renfield to show him how everything goes, but Mr. Renfield refuses, claiming the secrets of harnessing the power of smaller lives to become stronger aren't his to show. It's his master's. Despite Mr. Renfield munching on a fly as if it were popcorn, Dr. Seward keeps his cool. He presses on, suggesting that there would be more power in his blood as he is a larger being. Perhaps Mr. Renfield could show him, but Renfield denies it because the doctor's blood apparently belongs to his master. Who is his master? Why, it's Dracula, of course, as we can see in this beautiful double-page spread. We jump a few hours forward. We see Dr. Seward talking to a man named John. The man claims that everyone wishes to see Mr. Renfield. Apparently, Mr. Renfield killed 14 sailors, but now he's just this twitchy, creepy man. How could he have committed such atrocity? Dr. Seward refuses to let John meet with him. Mr. Renfield has been claiming that he did not commit any murder. As John and Seward speak, we understand that this is Jonathan Harker, the fiancé of Dr. Seward's daughter, Mina. The doctor asks John to keep things to himself as he doesn't want Mina to have nightmares about the events. Since Mr. Renfield has been caught eating flies and spiders, Dr. Seward believes that maybe his condition is not a mental disease at all. It could be a bloodborne disease that he got from Transylvania. Dr. Seward believes that Renfield can be healed by doing a blood transfusion, which shocks John. John doesn't think a heinous criminal like Renfield should be walking free, but Seward clarifies that he's only trying to heal his patient as a doctor. Whether or not Renfield would walk freely is a whole different matter. During their conversation, John mentions a professor who talks a lot about supernatural things at the club. This professor told John to carry a crucifix with him after talking about the sailors. Seward, however, believes the professor is talking absolute hogwash and urges John not to entertain such ideas. Even though John tries to defend his curiosity about these supernatural things the professor keeps talking about, Seward puts the argument to rest by bringing up Mina. What he does not know is Mina is already well aware of what happened with the sailors. We see her sitting with her friend Lucy, discussing the details of Renfield's assumed crime. Apparently, the captain's neck was slit open by teeth. The two friends discuss the horrific details of the crime, and Mina finds herself wondering how Renfield, that small, timid man, could have gone this far. While discussing, Lucy walks towards the window and notices a man standing among the ruins. As Mina asks Lucy to elaborate, we see her falling into some sort of trance. The panels are colored so beautifully that you can almost feel the effects of vampirical hypnotism through the page. We finally see Dracula, and oh boy, he has never looked more menacing. He turns into a wolf and howls at the moon. Renfield hears the howl and joins in, screaming for his master. When the guard tries to detain him, Renfield explains that this is Walpurgis night, and his master is here to feast on this dark city. He tracks down a redhead in the darkness of the night. Changing into his human form, Dracula seduces her and sinks his teeth into her neck. Draining her completely, Dracula changes into a bat and flies off into the darkness. The next morning, Renfield and Dr. Seward talk again. This time, Renfield explains that his master has been waiting for men like Dr. Seward, those who see supernatural things but refuse to believe them. Just as the doctor believes in himself, Renfield's master believes in himself, and even when the doctor meets his master, he won't be able to stomach him. Renfield's ramblings come to a halt when Seward informs him of his prognosis. Seward believes that something in Renfield's blood is causing his condition, and by removing the infected, rather poisoned blood, he would return to normal. Hearing this, Renfield goes berserk. He tries to attack the doctor, claiming his blood is not the doctor's to take. As Renfield is dragged away by the guard, he begs his master for help. And what do you know? Dracula, in his coffin, is listening. In the second issue, we see Lucy, Mina, Dr. Seward, and John leaving a party. From their conversation, it becomes evident that they have met Count Dracula himself, not knowing he's the master Renfield has been raving about. As they discuss the Count further, Dr. Seward realizes that Renfield's ship had actually disembarked from Transylvania, the same place the supposed Count is from. However, when he brings this up to John, John tells him not to worry about it. Sometimes you end up hearing a new word several times in the same week, and it's nothing but a mere coincidence. Mina and Lucy leave by carriage, and John asks the doctor to join him for a drink. We see the doctor in some sort of trance as he locks eyes with Dracula. Luckily, before anything bad could happen, John pulls the doctor with him to the club. As they enter the club, John and Dr. Seward are followed by Dracula in his wolf form, snarling at you. In the club, they meet the professor John had previously talked about. The old professor is none other than Abraham Van Helsing. While Van Helsing explains that the Nosferatu killed the men on the ship, Seward passes his judgment. He believes that just because Van Helsing is well connected, it doesn't make him a man of science like he is. John tries to calm Dr. Seward down, but soon enough, Van Helsing joins the conversation. He introduces himself to the doctor politely and asks to meet with Renfield, claiming it's urgent. However, Dr. Seward refuses. He doesn't believe the professor could have anything of substance to add to Renfield's treatment. The professor tries to make the doctor understand just how important the situation truly is, but Dr. Seward brushes him aside and stands up to leave. Back at the house, Mina and Lucy get ready for bed. After bidding her friend goodnight, Mina leaves the room. Lucy sits in front of the dresser, combing her hair, thinking of Count Dracula. At that moment, Dracula actually reaches out for her from the mirror. It becomes evident that Lucy has been under his trance for a while now. Cutting back to the asylum cell where Renfield is kept, he is seen kneeling on the ground, claiming to be weak. He calls out to his master, wanting to know why his master has forsaken him. He rambles about a gift Dracula is going to give to her and not to him. This her is Lucy, who is seen to be in Dracula's trance, opening the window of her bedroom. Dracula transforms into a bat and flies into her room. He turns into a human and sinks his teeth into Lucy's neck. The next morning, Dr. Seward and Mina talk about his meeting with Van Helsing. After the meeting, Seward feels he could be much better at helping his patient if he knew exactly what was going on. But everything he sees is based on superstitions, and he doesn't know if he should be grasping at those straws. Dr. Seward soon quiets down, claiming he's simply tired and will take the rest of the day off. Mina agrees and leaves to wake Lucy for breakfast and tea. But on opening the door, the sight that greets her is far worse than Mina could have imagined. Hearing her scream, Dr. Seward rushes up and is greeted by the ghoulish sight of Lucy lying in blood, completely drained and bloody. The third issue starts with Lucy's funeral. John tries to bring Mina home, but she refuses. She doesn't want to go home because home is where it all happened. Mina feels like there's something lurking in the dark shadows everywhere in the house, ready to take her just like it took Lucy. John and Mina soon notice the Count ominously standing at the edge of the cemetery, gazing their way. Mina mentions how she feels she's getting colder and colder every day, which, as we fans know, is not a good thing. In the asylum, Dr. Seward performs his blood transfusion test in front of other doctors. However, the whole thing gets botched, and the patient passes away. Consequently, he's brought in for a talk. The man tells Dr. Seward that his failed experiments sound just as crazy as Van Helsing's stories do. So Dr. Seward should allow Van Helsing to meet with Renfield if he doesn't want his asylum shut down. While Dr. Seward is in hot water, Mina has stolen her father's keys and makes her way to the asylum cell where Renfield is kept. They start talking, and even though Renfield is suspected of killing 14 able-bodied men in vicious manners, Mina does not hesitate to wipe his face clean. With her gentle touches, Mina tries to learn from Renfield what exactly is happening in London. Renfield talks about his master again, but before Mina can make any sense of it, Dr. Seward shows up. He reprimands her for her foolish decision to show up at the asylum when it's dark out and walks her out. As they walk, Mina tells her father about the eyes that keep following her. While they might not know, we see Dracula in his wolf form following them around. We see Van Helsing strolling the dark cobblestone alleys of London. As a bat flies over his head, he takes out a crucifix from his pocket. This bat is obviously Dracula, as you might have guessed. He shows up at the asylum, hovering outside Renfield's cell. He communicates his plans to his disciple with just his eyes, and Renfield is left heartbroken, begging his master to spare the one person who was kind to him. Back at the club, we see Dr. Seward meet up with Van Helsing. Van Helsing explains to Seward what is actually plaguing the streets of London, the evil that wants to tempt people with a mortal life, only to turn them to immortality at a moment's notice. Dr. Seward asks what they can do to defeat the creature, and Van Helsing puts it very simply: hunt until death. While they talk about hunting Dracula, we see him in Mina's room, already drinking blood from her neck. We start the last issue with Renfield making his way out of the cell. He talks about how he ended up meeting the Count in the first place. He was a weak man who really wanted respect, so he went beyond the mountain range and visited Castle Dracula on Walpurgis Night. There, at first, he was enchanted by the brides who promised him pleasures he had never experienced. But Dracula brushed them aside and promised Renfield power and purpose, something Renfield desired so badly. Renfield accepted and became a herald of Dracula. While Renfield has no problem seeing every man on the wretched streets of London suffer a terrible fate at the hands of his master, he refuses to let Mina go through the same. Mina was different, and he knew it. While he contemplates whether he can stand up to his master, Dracula shows up in front of Renfield with an obscene amount of dead rats. Renfield gleefully feasts on the rats, seeing this as a gift for him. Back at the Seward house, the professor tells Seward to lock Mina in a room to keep her safe. As the doctor tries to make sense of what's happening to his daughter, it becomes evident that Mina has been completely overtaken by Dracula's charm. Professor Van Helsing confirms the worst nightmare that could have been. Mina is the bride of Dracula. Her mortal body will keep withering away, and should she die and rise again, her soul would be beyond saving. Dr. Seward obviously has a hard time accepting. Professor Van Helsing points out that they will likely find Dracula in Carfax Abbey. They have to go there and deal with him immediately. While he wishes it never came to this, Van Helsing makes it evident that if Mina does not recover in time, they'd have to kill her too. The doctor feels overwhelmed with the decision he now has to take. He feels like it should not be the case, but he recognizes the look in Mina's eyes as the one he saw in Renfield's when he suggested taking the latter's blood. As the professor and doctor discuss more about the threat they're dealing with, John comes rushing in. It turns out Mina has managed to escape the house. Professor Van Helsing immediately rallies the men to go to Carfax Abbey as they are now racing against the clock. 3 men reach Carfax Abbey and notice Renfield there as well. John wonders why the man is there, but the professor shuts it down soon. Renfield walks inside the place, and sure enough, there are Mina and Dracula on the stairwell. As the 3 men call out Mina's name, Dracula snarls at Renfield. Renfield explains that he did not lead the men here, but Dracula doesn't care. Renfield begs for his life, claiming that he cannot die with the blood of so many innocents, especially Mina, on his hand. However, that does not thaw Dracula's icy heart. He throws Renfield off the staircase. Renfield falls, knowing that his master never wanted to save him in the first place, and Mina watches in horror, unable to do anything to save him. Mina manages to let out a scream that alerts the 3 men to her location. Seward is horrified seeing Renfield lying on the floor in a pool of his own blood. He stays back with Renfield, who begs the professor and John to save Mina. Renfield asks the doctor to give him grace, which at first the doctor refuses to do as he's not a religious man like the professor. In the meantime, the professor and John find the coffins. One of the coffins is empty, which means Mina is not yet dead and can be saved. Van Helsing asks John to find Mina while he opens the other coffin to find the man of the night lying there. Dracula tries to use his abilities on Van Helsing, but the professor manages to act quickly and drive a wooden stake through his heart. Dracula tries to fight back, but the deed is already done. John manages to find Mina in the crypt below. and thankfully, she is no longer under Dracula's control. Renfield asks the Doctor for grace once again, asking to be remembered as a man and not a vile creature. This time, Dr. Seward relents, bringing the dying man some peace in his last breath. Renfield passes away on Dr. Seward's lap, accepting his damnation as a human and not as another creature. The issue ends with a beautiful yet heartbreaking spread detailing Dr. Seward stepping out of Carfax Abbey with Renfield's body in his arms. With that, we come to the end of the Universal Monster Dracula comic. While the art is absolutely beautiful and enough to get you hooked from the first page, I gotta give credit where credit's due. The story is just impeccable. The pacing, the writing, and the way the characters are woven together is simply fantastic. And the way they've portrayed Dracula in the comic is just the chef's kiss. So let's look at the significant changes that this comic has made to the Dracula lore. Dracula's immeasurable power. Whether it's the book or the movie, we've always known that Dracula is powerful. His gaze is enough to enchant you. His ability to move amongst people while being seen yet unseen is certainly uncanny. His shape-shifting abilities, too, have definitely been the stuff of nightmares for a lot of us. However, I gotta admit, this comic just makes Dracula look so much more imposing than he already is. The way he shifts between a bat and a wolf is truly terrifying. The big old dog with glowing, rather flaming red eyes is definitely the stuff of nightmare. Vampirical hypnotism is definitely something that we associate with Dracula. However, this comic just makes that ability of his look absolutely visceral. The way his eyes are drawn every time he is seen using this ability makes me feel like I'm going to get hypnotized. I think one of the most interesting aspects of this Dracula that I haven't seen before is his silence. I mean, I'm not saying I expect Dracula to be a blabbermouth, but even Gary Oldman's Dracula or Bela Lugosi's Dracula said something. This comic version of Dracula is never seen speaking on panels. We get references about a conversation with him here and there, but we never see him speak. His telepathic abilities definitely took me by surprise because I wasn't expecting that at all. Now, I know that vampires will use compulsion to get their bidding done. However, the way Dracula and Renfield seem to be connected in this comic definitely implies that there's a deeper siredom running in this particular universe of Dracula. This implies that this version of Dracula could easily create his own army of undead warriors if he were given a chance, and that makes him an extremely formidable foe. Themes of Dracula, comic versus original novel. When it comes to Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's a classic gothic horror novel. However, it's not just a gothic horror novel. Stoker used the book to not only criticize the culture during that time, but also to usher in the ideologies of transcendentalism. And sure enough, this comic series does those themes justice as well. We see Mina talk about what society expects of her since she's engaged, and how Lucy, her best friend who was not engaged, could behave more freely. In the first issue, we see Lucy talk about the gruesome deaths and find some aspects of it erotic. The eroticism she displayed was something that Mina refused to show. However, once Mina was under the spell of Dracula, she became much more frank. The inherent sexual nature of people can't be curbed by simply putting societal limitation. Just like life finds a way, eroticism and paraphilias find a way too. Embracing who you are requires a person to hold themselves accountable, even for their sexual nature. And I believe the comic does a wonderful job holding up the dichotomy between Lucy and Mina when it comes to eroticism and sexuality. Parallelly, we have Renfield and Dr. Seward. While it's true that Renfield, as we see in the comics, is absolutely losing his mind, he still manages to make some very solid points against Dr. Seward. Dr. Seward is a psychologist, a man of science. He believes in whatever is in front of him and can be explained logically. But the problem with this type of approach towards any problems or life in general is that not every problem has a logical answer. Sometimes you just have to follow your gut instinct with no discernible reason except that it's your instinct, and more often than not, your gut instinct proves to be right. I quite enjoyed the conversations between Dr. Seward and Renfield because it begs the question of what exactly is the right approach. Do you trust your instincts, or do you actually go for facts? How do you know that the facts you're trying to unearth actually exist? Similarly, how do you deal with the guilt of failure? How do you deal with it when you know you can't save someone unless you push yourself to accept things that go against your general code of conduct and your general ideology? Dracula, as a piece of literature, book, or comic, is something that deserves to be looked at on a deeper level. The symbolism, the ideologies, the themes, all are weaved together in such a passionate little bundle that you simply have to dive in. Marvelous verdict. As a longtime Dracula fan, I'm a bit picky when it comes to Dracula iterations that have been flooding the market since the original book. However, take it from me, this comic is worth every second of your time and more. Simmons went all out to create this masterful world with the narrative and the drawing. The panels are beautifully constructed with masterful strokes of watercolor that, while maybe a bit jarring for us clear line art fans, are absolutely worth it if you wish to have a cerebral experience. Every panel where Dracula's eyes are painted are imprinted in my mind because of the sheer intensity the artist was able to portray with their carefully planned brushstrokes. If you haven't read the comic, you definitely should. And if you have, let us know in the comments what you guys think about this iteration of Dracula. Do you guys like him? Do you think they could have done a better job portraying the malicious entity known as Nosferatu? With that, we come to the end of this video, and I'll see you guys next time. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.